car clean sweep on the podium. Martin won the third race as well to take overall victory for the day.
Yeah, the first heat I had a bit of bad luck. Got held up in the start, but in the second heat went a bit better. And the third heat just as good.
Back to the two-wheelers now, and Ryan Hunt has had a good run of results in the open motorcycle category. 1 second overall and 2 victories have put him on top. But once again, the battle for second is far from over.
Yeah, actually, I missed the one round, the last round here at Tolton, and we lost out a lot of points. And it's quite important race meeting for myself and for my sponsors and stuff. So for me to get back up top is going to be vital. Got to do it.
It was a disappointingly small field that took the start for the third and final race of the day, and Ryan Hunt immediately took the lead on his big Fuchs Silkeline AGA Panasonic KTM. Hunt had already won the previous 2 races, and he was well on his way to another clean sweep. Mark Ramsey and Ian Topless were chasing hard, as were Gary Lipchik and Freddie Fourie. Only 10 bikes started this race, with a mixture of 250 and 400cc 2-stroke and 4-stroke machines. KTM, Kawasaki and Honda were all well represented, while the riders came from either motocross or off-road backgrounds. The first 4 had already started to open up a gap, with Hunt still leading Mark Ramsey, Topless on his Elf Suzuki, and Freddie Fourie on an Elna Fox Kawasaki. Gary Lipchik on his Santon Honda machine and Alan Julian on another Honda were knocking on the door. Lipchik, third in the championship behind Hunt and Julian, had moved up to 4th, having just passed Fourie. He'd finished 7th and 8th in the previous 2 races, well down on Julian, so he needed to make some amends. Ian Topless needed as many points as possible to make up for his no-show in the previous round. Alan Julian was on a mission too, having finished 2nd and 4th respectively. He needed to make up a deficit of 43 points on Ryan Hunt, so he had the leading threesome firmly in his sights. Having moved into 4th position, Julian knew that it'd take some doing to catch up with Hunt, Ramsey and Topless, while Lipchik couldn't have been happy being demoted to 5th. Hunt was controlling the race beautifully from the front, keeping just enough of a gap to ensure that neither Ramsey or Topless could attack. The battle for second had hotted up as Topless desperately tried to get his front wheel past Ramsey's Suzuki. This fight meant that they were slowing each other down, which let Hunt off the hook, but at the same time allowed Julian to get closer. Ramsey was riding a great race, pulling away from Topless on the straights and keeping him out in the twisty bits. Julian was the only one of the top riders in the field to use the slingshot technique out of some of the corners, allowing him to get a higher speed down the straights. But unfortunately for him, it was all to no avail. Hunt remained in the lead for another flag-to-flag victory to take the overall win for the day, with Ramsey holding station in 2nd ahead of Ian Topless. Fourie had passed Julian to finish 4th, and after 4 rounds, Hunt was leading Julian by 54 points in the championship. The third race for the super trucks, super specials and production vehicles, and the handicap system devised by the organisers was in use again. In short, this means that based on their best lap times in the previous race, the slowest vehicles start first with the fastest last. The theory is that all cars should cross the finish line together, but we all know how theories don't always have a bearing on reality. The first race was won overall by Rob Walk in his Super Pave Rover, while the second was won by Max Moore on his Industrial Hardware WPP Wingfoot. Glenn Clarkson in his Toyota finished 5th and 9th respectively. Last off the line were the faster super specials and the big super trucks. Craig Draper leading Jackie Hubert, Cliff Barker, Sauro van der Merwe and Kasi Coetzee off the line. The challenge for the faster vehicles was to first catch and pass each other and then get to the slower vehicles. Missing from the lineup was Claudio Piazzamuso, who suffered a blown engine on his Sobe Ford Courier in the second race. His non-start here would do his chances of catching his brother Paulo in the championship no good, even though Paulo didn't start at all due to illness. Cliff Barker in the Pennzoil Land Rover had 2 good results, winning the super truck category in both the previous races. He was clearly catching Jackie Hubert and Craig Draper in front of him, who were engaged in a furious battle as the Jojo Tank's Beetle Turbo tried to get past the Life Ford Courier. Among the super specials, Walk was leading Henry Kirstein in his Rockford Chenoweth and Glenn Clarkson in his Toyota, who'd started ahead of him. In the second race, Walk couldn't repeat his overall and class victory of the first, finishing 6th overall and 3rd in class behind Max Moore and Jackie Hubert. Joubert had succeeded in getting past Draper and was now bearing down on the super specials in front of him, while Draper was rapidly being caught by Barker. The three super specials would have been well aware of the fact that the faster cars were approaching, but they were involved in a fight of their own. Barker was now on the rear bumper of Draper's Ford, looking for a way past. But Draper, who was third in the championship behind the two Piazza Musso brothers, was determined to end up as high as possible to take advantage of their absence. Cyril van der Merwe was also closing in. Things were going to get pretty hectic soon, as Walk, Kirstein and Klaassen were not only catching the production vehicles in front of them, but also being caught by the spectacular super trucks behind them. Joubert had shaken loose from Draper, while Barker was struggling to get past. Van der Merwe in the life Ford Courier was getting closer all the time, while Coetzee in the Minolta Toyota Hilux had also arrived on the scene. This is Walk, Kirstein and Klaassen, reeling in Max Moore and Frank de Greef ahead of them. A mammoth high-speed traffic jam was looming. Willem Marx in the F&D racing Isuzu Bucky was being chased by production vehicle championship leader Frank de Greef in his rotary-engined F&D racing Beetle, followed by second race winner Max Moore in his industrial hardware WPP Wingfoot. Things would start getting confusing as the slower production vehicles were being caught by the faster super trucks and specials. The handicap system only works in theory, as everything depends on how fast the quicker cars can get through the traffic. Most of the vehicles are rear-wheel driven, and with the track surface changing all the time, the wet patches in some of the corners were potential hazards for just about everybody. Joubert was getting closer to the other super specials in front of him, but rally legend Cyril van der Merwe was also catching up. Cliff Barker's Pennzoil Land Rover had slowed down dramatically and had already been caught and passed by a flying Cassie Coetzee, who was pushing to get past Draper. Marx was doing a good job of holding de Greef at bay, which allowed everyone else behind them to catch up. De Greef was being chased by Moore, Walk and Kirstein. Klaassen had dropped back in the meantime, but Joubert was closing in. Max Moore had found a good line through the penultimate corner of the track, and with the rest of the group following Marx on the inside of the sweep, Moore decided to go round the outside. He got a good drive out of the corner, and with Robert Walk stuck behind de Greef, Moore moved past to slot in right behind Marx. This move put Moore in a good position, and he passed Marx under full power through the next corner. All of this had allowed Jacky Joubert in the Jojo Tanks Beetle Turbo to tuck onto the back of this group. This took Moore into the overall lead, and he immediately started to pull away. Joubert had passed Klaassen and was lining up Walk, who was the biggest loser in that little melee, while Van der Merwe had also arrived on the scene. De Greef went wide to let Van der Merwe through, but ahead of them, Walk had decided that he simply had to get past Kirstein and Marx. He cleverly stayed on the inside line, forcing Kirstein to be boxed in and lining himself up for the next right-hander. Moore in the lead, but probably not for long, as Cyril van der Merwe had carved his way through the slower vehicles. Cassie Coetzee in the Minolta Toyota Hilux was facing a dilemma. Getting past is never easy where the track is twisty. Van der Merwe has never been scared of close racing and was doing a great job, first getting through the slower traffic without missing a beat, and now he was chasing Robert Walk for second position. Super Van quickly disposed of the Super Pave driver, and now it was a straight fight for victory as Van der Merwe started to close in on Moore. Coetzee was struggling to get through the traffic behind them. The gap was closing rapidly as the life Ford Courier came bearing down on Max Moore. Behind them, Joubert had Robert Walk in his sights. After his overall victory earlier in the day, Moore was definitely not going to hand Van der Merwe the lead on a plate. But with little more than 100 horsepower against the 300-odd available to Van der Merwe, it was never really in doubt. The 11-time South African rally champion could now stretch the legs of the light Ford Courier, while Moore was going to have to be careful not to give up his position to Walker Joubert, who were keeping out a storming Cassie Coetzee in the Minolta Hilux, making its first appearance this year. The unfortunate Cliff Barker was still dropping back in his Pennzoil Land Rover. Van der Merwe was well on his way as he came up to the final corner of the race, while Moore had a last little infield excursion, almost losing second position to a charging Robert Walk. But with 2 second positions already under his belt, it was a satisfied Van der Merwe who took the checkered flag for an overall and class victory. Moore could also feel satisfied with a good day's work, 1 overall and 2 class victories, with Walk crossing the line third. Despite finishing third, Cliff Barker took the overall victory in the Super Truck category, while Claudio Piazzamusso's results were good enough to give him the championship lead. Joubert's results were sufficient for an overall Super Special win, while Willem Marx took his first overall victory of the year.
It was very enjoyable. I was sort of predetermined to take anybody out that's going to bug around with me. And things worked out well. No, it was nice. Lovely.
So once the handicap system worked well, because
that's how it should have been all day, really. We were over-handicapped in the beginning, I think. But, you know, things happen. And I enjoyed it.
For more information, visit our website.